Hey everybody, and welcome to a special segment of the Richard Listens Show. We are here live at Hollywood Production Center, and what can I say? We've got guests that fly in from all over the country, and when they're in town, we need to capitalize on their limited presence. So we are happy to be filming this one, and it'll be airing slightly later date. So sorry you can't have the live stream on this one, but feel free to write in your questions after these exciting topics on entrepreneurship, motivational speaking, financial advisement. All these topics come up, and we'll connect you with our guests for today. As always, I give you a little rundown on myself. This show is about performance, stepping into your own performance realm, challenging yourself to get uncomfortable and to grow into different areas. And boy, has this week been uncomfortable for me. So unlike my professional cap, I like to be a little bit authentic here with my listeners. Coming off a 3-day weekend soccer tournament in Riverside, California. There were 220 teams present. We played in the sun, we played in the hail, we played in the rain. And it was tremendous joy and growth in terms of working with youth soccer clubs. So we're going to get a little bit into that, but just thought I shared about that. I was uncomfortable. I think my legs need a rest, and it was a lot of joy, though. So if any of you are looking to do something outside your day jobs, getting out there, learning something, and challenging yourself to develop the next generation, it's tremendously rewarding, if not exhausting in the short run. So without further ado, our guest today is Mr. Sedrick Thomas. He is here visiting us from the lovely city of New Orleans, in which he will educate me on some of the events going on there now, so I'll get jealous and want to make a visit to come see him. He is an entrepreneur and inspirational speaker. He holds security licenses in multiple it's a Series 6, 63, 26, and 65, and he's licensed with FINRA. He is now also holds a seat on the African American Senior Leadership Council, and today he's going to educate us about a book he's recently co-authored with Lisa Jones called Real Wealth Begins in the Mind and the God System. So we're going to see just how much Sedrick and I have in common, getting into maybe the spirituality of money and investment, and how to make it rich. Because right now we want Richard Listens Show to go global. Absolutely. So without further ado, please welcome Mr. Sedrick Thomas.
Well, thank you, Richard. It's a pleasure to be here today. And
thank you for making time on a short visit to town.
Yes, I'm excited. I'm excited to have an opportunity to share with you today and the audience.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit. I mean, were you in town on a convention, or are you here personal?
Just personal. I came here, and while I was here, I connected with Miss Janet. And we have a lot of the same friends. I think once before here at the studio, one of my dear friends, Gary Carnegie, I happened to have seen him and his family. And so I'm excited.
Have you done much podcasting? I think it's the LA Times today about this is a new growth industry.
Yeah.
I've
done some of
could
it.
talk to you about investing afterwards.
Yes, yeah. Pretty excited about having an opportunity. Great. So as I mentioned, I'm from as you mentioned, I'm from the great city of New Orleans, Louisiana, and our city is pretty exciting.
Are you from
New Orleans,
downtown, the French Quarter? Or?
Yes, I grew up maybe about 5 minutes from downtown New Orleans. And it's a great city right now. A lot of great things are happening. It's Mardi Gras time, and so our city is always festive, but it's really getting to its peak right now for this time of the year.
And have you been able to stay invested and involved since Katrina? I mean, how's that economic rebirth and
yes, the city
going?
has really responded, and I've been in the financial services business now for 30 plus years, and from a business standpoint, Katrina was one of the best things that happened to me. Although I lost a lot of material things during that period of time, from a business standpoint, it was truly a blessing. It allowed my business to expand outside of the city of New Orleans and the state of Louisiana, and now I have registered representatives or agents inside of my business, about 500 that are scattered over 4 states, and all of that, a large part of that happened as a result of Katrina. You know?
So explain that. So up to 500. That's pretty amazing. So, and that's over what? We're looking at 15 years now.
Yes.
So how did Katrina cause you to get into this industry, or to?
Well, I was already in the industry, but I had
right. You said 30 years. Right?
Yeah. So, but I was located just mainly in New Orleans and in the state of Louisiana. And as a result of Katrina and people being scattered all across the country, many of the agents that were working with me that were licensed went to other cities, and they set up offices and began to expand in those areas, like Dallas and Houston, Texas.
I was going to say, the whole 10 corridor, right, goes right across the South.
Yes, and so it really gave my business an opportunity to expand, and so now we have have offices in all of these areas, and so being in the financial service, I got started in the financial services business after a career in civil engineering, which is what I went to school for, and found myself not really loving what I was doing, kind of hating my job and my boss and my limited income and that opportunity.
Civil
engineering. And
is that like public works and that kind
of? Hybrid, designing pumping stations and designing road work, that type of stuff. And I did it for a very short period of time because I really wanted and had the desire inside of me to become a businessman. And it got started at a pretty early age. And so I began to seek for something because I didn't like it. I began to seek something that would allow me to have an unlimited income, and started a couple business ventures that failed. And then after, the Bible says that if you seek, you'll find, right? And so I was in church on a Sunday praying for an opportunity, and on a Tuesday, I got invited down to a seminar, which I showed up on a Thursday. And the gentleman had been in financial services, and he was looking to mentor and coach some people. And
so I want to slow you down right there, Cedric, because you just said like 3 light bulbs went off just in your just introducing that, and for a separate purpose, which is, I like to, help high performers take a minute to kind of get a picture of that moment, right? Okay. Because, it's something that, so we'll get back to that in a second. But the first thing you said is, you realize you were unhappy.
Yes.
How long? And people that are listening out there, particularly millennials, right? They think they're unhappy, and they're like, "Well, does the change come tomorrow?" So how long was the process from unhappiness to that meeting? That discovering opportunity. Yeah, right.
I would say, Richard, is probably about a year after working. I started working for this particular engineering company as an intern. And then probably after a year of working with them after school, I just realized I wasn't being fulfilled. I didn't have the joy of doing something I had a passion for, and so I started a couple ventures. They failed, but I kept seeking, and which is extremely important. I think many times, especially for all generations, not just millennials, that the manifestation of things is a process, and you plant a seed, and then eventually it'll take root. And if you have
now, did you know that then?
No, sir.
Okay.
No, sir.
Okay.
No, sir. I had no idea.
Okay.
I had no idea. Now, as a more mature human being, now I can look back and I can see how all of this transpired. And I'm writing a book titled "The God System." And it gives 8 steps that I've learned in manifestation, and one of the things that I've realized and I've learned is that when you ask, you truly do receive. You just got to have enough wisdom to recognize that the thing that you're asking for has come to fulfillment. So if I can continue.
Oh yeah, okay. I hope you don't mind me cutting you off.
Yeah, no. You cut me off
because because it's a beautiful, just getting to that moment, right, in manifestation, right, seeing that first opportunity.
Yes.
Seeing, that's. I was wondering, like, did you notice anything when you was it in a church? You said the meeting
No,
downtown?
it was a downtown meeting. But prior to the meeting, I was in church praying. I was asking God. I said, Lord, I really don't like this job, but I want something that's going to allow me to have my dreams come true. Because the people that I found myself working with had been in the industry for 30 years, but they weren't living the dream that I imagined. And so I asked on a Sunday. On a Tuesday, I hear an advertisement about a gentleman and his wife who were in the community that I lived in that were teaching people, entrepreneurs, people how to go into business and write business plans. So I show up on a Thursday, and then the gentleman says, well, look, we started this business, and if you're money motivated and you got a lot of passion and desire to do something, you can make six figures. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, man, God must be listening to my prayers, because I just asked for something on a Sunday and now I'm here on a Thursday.
So there's something about the minute you put your prayers out there and allow there to be a little bit of space for a response that kind of had you keyed into like, okay, my curiosity is,
yes,
so I have the openness, I have desire. I'm not sure for what,
but I got to give it time.
So
there's a concept, there's a principle in the Bible, which we all know, that teaches seed, time, and harvest. And the problem is most people want seed harvest, and they forget the time that's in the middle, right? It takes some time, and so absolutely.
Yeah, there's a great book that I actually reread the conclusion yesterday called The Pumpkin Plan.
Really?
Have you heard about it?
No, I have not.
And someone pointed out to me, a former friend of the show, Charlie Davis, who pointed out it's about like, what would you do tomorrow if you wanted to raise a championship pumpkin? Mm-hmm. It's a great example. I don't know how many people do this kind of thing, but I myself wouldn't know what to do, but I'd probably take a drive with you down to Target and see if they had pumpkin seeds. Well, they said, well, if you go there, you're going to get the cheapest seeds. Mm-hmm. And then what happens when you start growing pumpkins and they're not championship level? Mm-hmm. Do you hang on to them? So there's some great metaphors in there for building a business plan and an action plan. So I'm sure, a lot of skills that they don't give us in, I always say they don't give you in psychology school or in medical school how to run a business or how to plant things to fruition. You expect to be able to just hang up a shingle or say, here I am, and manifestations should occur. But I think it's a real limitation. Especially nowadays, we're wanting things faster, quicker. So this whole understanding of what the process should be or what things I might have to go through in kind of delaying gratification or learning how to adapt a variety of skills. Maybe it's not reinforced. So I'm glad that you're bringing that up.
Absolutely.
But just because I hear spirituality is important to you, was your family, did they teach you about this basis? Did you have that background?
Yeah, I did have the foundation. It turns out that I was fortunate enough to be raised in the home of a Southern Baptist preacher, and so many of the concepts and biblical principles that I learned, obviously, I got from my parents. And then they really helped me out in business when I went into business, because I was able to reflect back to the things that I've learned and apply them to the principles that I learned in the Bible, And so absolutely.
Through their teaching, or
through
became an internal process for you?
I would think both, through their teaching, and then me internally finding out my relationship to the Creator and how His principles and function, And so I began, as I began to go into business, I began to apply many of those principles of seed, time, and harvest, some of the things that we've talked about. Yeah.
So how long did that initial seed take to begin to show signs that your passion could also lead you to some success?
I think it from the time in which I joined, started my business, I did begin to have some type of immediate success. So it took me maybe about a year to learn enough to make a decision to go into this arena full time. I made a full time commitment, and then from that point I began to have success. Worked hard, had a vision. I tell a story here recently of in about 2000. I had been in business, Richard, for a period of time at this point, but I had a friend of mine by the name of Columbus Pollard who had came and did a seminar, an event for me, and this was in 2000, and all he talked about was his Vision 2007. And after the entire weekend of him lecturing, and I came after that event, I said, man, I don't have a Vision 2007, so I'm going to write one. And at the time, I had a particular position inside our company. I was a senior vice president. I had about 4 vice presidents with me. And I just put some stuff down on the paper. I didn't any more believe it than a man on the moon. And but I put some stuff down on paper, and at this point I knew a little something about goal setting, and so I would take I didn't write down the goals every day, but I put them on my computer, and when I'd log in, I'd kind of meditate on them, and probably the first 90 to 120 days I did it more frequently, and then after that I would probably do.
And these were more long-term goals.
These were there was my Vision 2007.
This is like a 7-year plan.
7-year plan.
Okay.
What I wanted to have accomplished. Didn't believe it.
But you're just kind of looking at it. You're keeping it present.
Keeping it in front of me. And so Katrina hit. I was sitting in 2005. I lost the paper. And then in 2014, I moved from one office to another, and I was unpacking some things. And Richard, I came across this piece of paper. And I was in awe that 90% of the things that I had written down had come to manifestation, which taught me a principle that what we've got to do is once we make a decision to do something, just create a vision for it, right? And you don't have to necessarily believe it. Here's another principle I've learned, is that when you get a vision for something, you don't have to believe it. You just have to create the belief for it. And once you create the belief for it and give it some time, the manifestation of those things will come to fruition.
Yeah, that's painful that it had to take Katrina to go through that and a lot of loss. Yeah. But sometimes the reminders are there, right? That we're doing this internal work, and there's some things that external circumstances can't take away. I mean, I hope our listeners can identify with that. People go through, for me, it was my father losing his job my freshman year in college. The rug gets pulled out. They've like a whole sequence of books called "Who Moved My Cheese,"
and
there's all everything to do with the cheese, right? And you read it and you're like, oh my God, I'm just like a rodent. I haven't evolved with my PhD yet, but in some level, emotionally, we like things to be where they're at, and we like to control the plan. But that's beautiful because you tapped into a few important parts about mental skills training for athletes and high performers, which are goal setting, short and long term, and then with creating a vision statement. I know for myself with my work on composing a book right now, having it up and seeing it every day, every time you sit down, and there's kind of this isn't important, or I'm not an author, whatever that negative self-talk we may have, and you may not even be aware of it. When you see that reminder up in front of you, it reminds you that you've placed that I am an author, and that I am writing a book. And I find it's this reinforcement that no matter what else is going on, if I can feed into it 30 minutes, 1 hour a week even, some small amount, the minute I sit down and start doing it, I get this internal reinforcement. It's like nobody else can take it away from me. And so I think there's something beautiful about helping people in whatever profession touch that passion and get back into it, because that fuels continued motivation.
And so what I've learned is that when you do exactly that, Richard, the people, the situations, the circumstances, the conditions, the ideas and opportunities, they'll come to us. We just have to have the wisdom to recognize what is occurring, and that coincidences don't really happen. It's the manifestation of the things that we desire. And many times, the negative, I won't say negative, but the experiences that happen to us that we can't see are being positioned for the good of things. I have a daughter, my baby daughter. She had graduated from 8th grade, and she wanted to go to the school that her sister was going to, which was a pretty predominantly very, very good school in this inner city of New Orleans. It's an all-girls Catholic school, and she was not accepted. And so she was devastated. She was devastated. I told her, I said, Jade, my life experience is that when one door is open, there's a better one closed. One door, a better opportunity is there for you. And I told her an example of how I did not get accepted into one school. I ended up going to another one, and it turned out to be the best thing for me. So I shared that experience.
Was that the
with
McDonough school?
Yeah, McDonald 35.
Yeah.
McDonald. I ended up. I had applied for McMain, which I was rejected from that school. Ended up going as an athlete to McDonald's 35. It was a great.
Well, what was your sport?
Basketball.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was a school where I like to say everybody. It was an inner city school, or still is, and but everybody wanted to be lawyer, doctors, and Indian chiefs. And so it was the best thing that happened to me, man. It really helped me get on my path. So anyway, so I shared that with Jade, and she ended up getting into another school. And that school ended up being the best thing that happened for her, right? And that's kind of like how life can be sometimes. You ask, it's not your responsibility to figure it out. Just let God and His universal system do it, and it'll happen for you, you know?
Yeah, and how rewarding that must be for you as a father to be sharing that principle, even though you don't want to see your children struggle and be disappointed.
Yeah.
That they have their own internal mechanism going off of sibling comparisons, and and we don't want them to be disappointed. But having that bigger belief in purpose of going through adversity, teaching that there's opportunity on the other side of it.
Yes.
That must create a lot of fulfillment.
Yes.
For you as well.
Yes.
I was trying to think. So there's delayed gratification in there. It also teaches a lot of resilience, I think, because when you don't allow that negative belief to start to get created, I am the way I am because I didn't get into that school, or I didn't become successful because I didn't go to Ivy League, or I didn't get the scholarship, whatever it is that an athlete out there is wrestling with, that then creates an emotional reaction, a shutdown or frustration. So the minute you say, well, no, I got to keep looking for other options. Maybe it's, right, Tom Brady, right? Maybe it's the 6th round I'm going. Right. Maybe it's I got to walk on, right? I got to look for whatever way I can claim this is mine. It shifts a very different experience.
Yeah, and I was just sharing with a friend of mine recently. I think there are a couple things that I teach, Richard, that there are three things that we do that create our reality and the manifestation of the things. It's the thoughts that we have, it's the words that we speak, and the actions that we take. And so whenever we say I can't do anything, we stop our creative ability to figure out how we can. So I work to and have my kids, and I teach people to let's eliminate the word I can't. And then whenever we say I am anything, then we're commanding our mind and our body to a particular destination. And so whenever we're having some adversity, it's better for us to think about, well, I can, I am. And so we'll figure it out, man. We'll figure it out. The things, the situations, everything are lined up for us,
So do you bring that to your teams? I mean, do you work one-on-one with your team, or do you how do you manage such a large group?
Okay, good. And so I do both. I have one-on-ones with many of the leaders and coach them on how to think and how to work and how to build businesses, and then I do them obviously in team meetings, and I have an opportunity to speak in large crowds and of people and just kind of share these principles. I was I'm being led to write a book, which I mentioned, called The God System, the 8 Steps of Creating and Manifesting.
So you gave us the first step manifestation?
Well, the first step is to ask for what you want. One of the things that I've learned is that what we've got to do is ask. A lot of times, Richard, people don't ask for stuff because they can't see. And so they don't ask. If they can't see something, then they don't ask God for it. And what I've learned is that you just ask. And then if you're going to ask, our president, doesn't matter how people feel about him, but in the book, The Art of the Deal, he says, look, if you're going to think, you might as well think big. And I say that if you're going to ask God, you might as well ask him big. We ask many times too small. I remember when I first started in business, I was at Mr. Warren's seminar, and I said, Lord, if you just bless me to become one of these vice presidents, I'll bless your people. And what I found out is I got exactly what I wanted. What I should have been asking for was the top. And that was a position inside our company called Senior National Sales Director. I should have been asking to become $1 million income earner, but I wasn't, because it's not what I could see. And that the first principle that I've learned, and I teach in the book, is that ask, and when you ask big. The second one then that I've learned is then you create a vision, which is, I use the example of my friend when telling me about his vision 2007, right? Is you just get a vision for it, right? And you don't have to believe it. You just put it. You just created a vision for it. And you put it and you post it, and you see it, and so you begin to internalize it, which is the third key. Is then you you meditate to create what you want. I had the opportunity recently to attend a seminar or retreat by a gentleman by the name of John Kehoe. He's the author of Mind Power into the 21st Century. And he teaches in his book, which is one of the things that I've learned, is that every day we should have a creation period. Well, we go in, spend about 20 minutes a day, you probably do this as a sports coach, and teach people to meditate. And during this period of time, reality does not have the right to enter in. So you don't think about your current conditions. Yeah. You just kind of see the end,
Well, it's beautiful, because just last night, after a kind of freezing cold practice and all that, I was working with an athlete on an imagery exercise, and we were going into the difference between when you practice imagery, and it's something I've probably fallen prey to, only speaking about, right, everyone knows kind of the visualize, right? Imagery, okay, I'm going to see myself at the free throw line, I'm going to see myself knocking it down, but do we teach, number one, before you practice imagery, you've got to relax, right? If you're not aware, if you're freezing from the practice, if you're tired, what kind of, your mind will not go into creativity. So there has to be a portion of both. First of all, doing things to help people to get into the right body state. A lot of my work with somatic psychology is helping people track tension in their body, notice tension in the arms and shoulders, and allowing themselves to kind of let it go for the moment. Let whatever you're holding on to go away, so that you can enter a different space. And then when you enter a space of imagery, are you using all the five senses? Can you smell, fresh grass on a wet soccer field, after they've, cut it or freshly, sprinkled it to make it ready for the tournament? Can you hear the sound of, if you're going in against an opposing team that's creates a lot of tension for you, can you hear the chants? So that your body starts to kind of get aroused in a good way, right? So it's not just preparing yourself, in your mind, where you can't actually, your body can't understand, can't prepare. So some of it is gradually learning how to fully let your body see yourself as that national sales director in front of the 500 people, and take a look. What are people's faces? Are there 5 people smiling and 3 people checked out? And track how you feel about all of it, because that's what you're going to experience.
Right. Absolutely. And getting into the feeling of it as is already
right, because you want to feel that. I mean, I want to feel the excitement of handing you my book in a year, in New Orleans,
absolutely, that's right. Me introducing you in front of a crowd of people.
Okay,
absolutely.
Game on.
Absolutely.
So you're giving me some imagery practice now.
Yeah.
So how did you make the jump now, where you from businessman to motivation and public speaker? I mean, was there your own process that had to get broken down into sub goals?
No, I think in the nature of the business that I'm in, and building a distribution team, a team that would distribute the products that we market, part of it is keeping them inspired. And so I had to make self-development or self-growth a part of my natural path in business. So I was committed to reading books and self-help books. Probably the first self-help book I ever read was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, which ironically a lot of successful people who committed to self-development say that it was one of the first books that they read. And so then from there it was just the teaching of those principles. And then as time went on, it just went from there.
Is that probably the if there was one book you could recommend to young entrepreneurs out there, would that be it? What would you choose?
Okay, that's a very good question. And Richard, I share with people that I meet, said, look, you'll probably never meet anybody that's spent more money in their entire lives on self-development than I have. I've calculated that I've spent well over $100,000 in the purchasing of books and programs and flying here and flying there. And but if I were getting started all over again in business, there'd be two books that I want to have. Number one, it'd be the Word of God, which would give me all of the foundation of all these principles. And secondly, would be the book that I ran across a couple years ago, Mind Power by John Kehoe. And the reason why this book was so impactful to me is that if you've ever read self-help books, 90% of them are the same. You know, it's all visualization, affirmations. The difference is maybe the stories and the anointing that a person will have. Well, what John Kehoe's book did was it taught me how to control thought. That everything starts in the mind. When we do have a negative thought, how do we replace it? Because our mind is just a station for sending and receiving thought. And it doesn't care, our mind doesn't care if the thoughts serve us or they're good for us or not. It only accepts and receives. And so when we get a negative thought, I can't do anything. Do I accept it? No, I need to immediately identify it and then replace it with a thought that serves me. And so that would be the book.
This is really important. Yeah, they call it in cognitive behavioral therapy,
yes,
thought stopping, or even picturing. I have a lot of my clients just picture a stop sign, because if we're not aware of this process, we're not aware that negative thinking. The thing is, the body it thinks it's serving us as well.
Yes,
it's a faulty system. That thought makes you feel unsafe, and so you feel, well, why should I go out on a date? Why should I try for that job? Because I could get hurt, right? Whereas if you immediately start to develop a little bit more direction around your beliefs and attitudes, and awareness really of your thoughts, of being able to tolerate, I know it's uncomfortable, but I welcome the challenge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or, I know it's uncomfortable, but that's something I want to learn, or this is an area I want to grow. So it becomes a lot more affirming and growth directed, as opposed to kind of feeding this kind of, fight or flight mechanism, which is constantly telling us to shut down. So it's hard to overcome these kind of messages. How do you find that with your, I'm sure when you have a team out there and how do you overcome blockages when people say I'm stuck or I can't grow past a certain point?
Very good question. Let me tell of a recent incident that just happened just like 3 nights ago.
Please.
I have a niece. Her name is Paris, and I was just on Facebook, and I noticed that she was making several comments, and she wasn't in a great state. So I immediately picked up the phone. I called her and asked her what was wrong with her, and she was crying, and she was saying, I'm depressed. And I said, okay, I'm going to teach you in a matter of 5 minutes how to change that. Because all depression is mainly, as I see it, Rich, is just an emotion, somebody feels a negative emotion, and they're associated with depression. And they say, well, I'm depressed, and I'm depressed, and I'm depressed, and I'm depressed. And before you know it, any feeling said over and over and over again becomes a belief. So I said to her, Paris, I'm going to teach you in 5 minutes how to change that. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to visualize one incident recently in your life that gave you the most joy. And she just graduated from high school about a year ago. So she said, well, when I graduated from high school, I said, well, how did that feel? And she told me how. I said, okay, now here's what I want you to do. I want you, when you get home, and I was talking to her as she got home, I said, I want you to get in the mirror and I want you to repeat after me. I'm alive, I'm awake, and I feel great. And do it with emotion. And then we did it for about 5-6 times. And I asked her, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being I'm ready to commit suicide. 10, I'm full of joy and excitement about life. Where are you on a scale of 1 to 10? So she says, when we started, I'm about a 2. Well, after doing this about 4 or 5 times, I'm alive, I'm awake, and I feel great. I asked her how she felt. She says, I'm about a 6. I said, okay, great. I'm going to show you how to get a 10. Now we're going to do it, and we're going to associate the feeling that you had of graduating. And we're going to say it, and we're going to say it loud. Don't worry about who's in the house. And I'm alive, and I'm awake, and I feel great. Now see again that feeling that you had when you graduated. Richard, in a matter of 5 minutes, she went from being suicidal, I'm depressed, life isn't going great, wonderful, to man, I'm alive, I'm awake, I feel great, I got great feelings, and so it's just a matter of teaching that. Now, I think the biggest, whenever we have a mental block, I believe it begins with the words that we say. That if we can change what we say, we start the process of change. And so, immediately I got to get rid of I'm depressed or things aren't going right to, thinking positive or saying something positive. I think that's where the process begins.
Yeah, so this is, this corrective self-talk starts to shift, right? And then I think even the action of having her say it outside or out loud and, look in the mirror, allows you to embody, right? And then I love that you drew upon that you had that moment, knowing her as well as you did, of success. Because, when you're in depression, it's, right, it starts to get internalized or shut down a lot of painful emotions, or it triggers sometimes this kind of learned helplessness of I don't know how to get out of it. So being able to see yourself, number one, as a success, maybe take some of the pressure off, and help someone tap into again. Well, to get into that question of what am I needing? What am I wanting? Like it gets really shut down with these beliefs about ourselves.
Right.
So we had one of our former guests came in here. He also was a child of a minister, I believe, or pastor, and he was talking about how he lost a job and was told on the way out, you'll never amount to anything. But from that place, he then heard them talking about the Clippers as they'll never amount to anything. And that drew him into, well, I'll be there for them. Something natural started to take over, right? So it doesn't automatically, like overnight, you don't. And from that place, from his identity with the underdog, he becomes like, he's become their like leading fan. He's become a spokesman. He's become a motivational speaker because he took the pain and turned it into helping other people's lift up theirs.
That sounds like Clipper Darrell.
But that's who it was.
Yeah,
that's who
he's
it was.
known all over. You even know him in New Orleans.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Clipper Darrell. He's known everywhere.
They treat him well if he comes to a game down there.
Absolutely.
Well, that's the power of motivation, human experience. It transcends even sports rivalries.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's amazing that you're able to. So it sounds like you're able to take the self-help work and use it to uplift your family and people around you. So who does it for you? What tools do you use to keep yourself locked in and focused?
Well, I make that's a very good question. I have several mentors, and so one of the things that I do is I make self-development a part of my daily routine. Is that I every day I spend 30 minutes to an hour reading some type of inspirational literature, some book that's going to help me with my thinking, listening to someone.
What are you reading now?
Right now I'm reading the book by by Joe Dispenza, Unbreaking the Habit of Being Yourself. Who's a very good author. And one of the things that he teaches is that, as human beings, we think some 60 to 70,000 thoughts every day. Unfortunately, that 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts that we had yesterday. And so that we've got to control our thing. Yeah, man. It's that when we think about it, we just keep thinking about the same things instead of creating new thoughts. And so how to do that every day. So that's how I stay on top of it, and just constantly doing that, making self-help a part of my everyday living.
Anything else you do? So I'm sorry I cut you off. It's your own practice. So besides reading, other things that you...
Yeah, here recently, I became a triathlete, and which is another great experience.
In the ocean or in the pool?
Well, currently in the pool. So back in May of this past year, I had a birthday coming up. And I was thinking about, man, what am I going to do? You know, I've been an athlete all my life. What will I do going into this next phase of my life to stay physically fit? Well, ironically, I had met a childhood friend. I saw a childhood friend a couple years earlier, and he looked extremely well. And while I was out running one day, and I asked Roland what he was doing. He says, well, I'm a triathlete. You know, I bike, I swim, and I run. I said, okay, well, great, man. That sounds great. And he was telling me about it. And I said, man, I'm never doing that crap, right? And but here it is a couple years later. I'm thinking, well, I want to stay fit. Maybe I'll do what Roland's doing. So I called him up. I said, Roland, I think I want to start doing this triathlon stuff with you. He said, great. Well, meet me out at the tomorrow, and we'll start training. So I meet him, and we just go on about a 3 or 4 mile run, which was no problem for me. And he tells me, okay, well, I need you to go buy a bike. I said, okay, well, I'll go down to a little local sports authority and buy a bike. He said no,
Cannondale.
No, that's not a bike, G. You got to go to the bike store. So I said, okay, I'll go to the bike store. I walk in there, Richard. There's not a bike in there for under a rack, $1,000. I'm like, man, what kind of crap is this? So I ended up buying a bike. And before I knew it, I started training. And the first thing that I did was a duathlon, which was a bike, a run, and a run, a bike, and a run. And so I ran. It was a 4 mile run, a 19 mile bike, and a 4 mile run. And it took me 2 hours and 14 minutes to do it. And then I fell in love with the sport. Now, the thing that I had to do was I had to learn, and all this.
That sounds like a great entryway into triathlon.
It was. And so what I had to do is I thought I knew how to swim, but I did not know how to swim. So I had to learn how to swim. And it's ironic, all the things that I've learned and I talk about in the God system, the 8 steps of creating, manifesting whatever you want, I used in this triathlon deal, right? And so I had to learn how to swim. So I had to do the same thing. Man, I'd watch the videos of great swimmers, and I'd go through the mind and see myself swimming like they swam. And I got me a swimming coach, and she taught me how to breathe right and how to stroke right. And I got these videos of me calling myself swimming, almost drowning, till a month or 2 later, being more easily and effective at doing it. And then maybe about 4 months after I started this, I did my first triathlon. And now I'm loving it, and I train pretty much every day.
How many have you done?
I've done 2 triathlons, probably a half a dozen dual, and so we have our first triathlon of the season coming up in May, and this will be an 800-meter open water swim for me, which will be the first time I've done this. So I'm pretty excited.
So does that mean you have to prepare in the ocean down there, or where?
Yes, we got it in Lake Pontchartrain.
Okay.
Lake Pontchartrain, and we train that. But right now, for me, it's pool swimming. It's pool swimming.
Yeah, we have family that grew up in Metairie, right on Lake Pontchartrain. Yes. So bring us with you on the swim.
Yes. I look forward to entertaining you and your wife when you come to New Orleans.
Thank you.
Yes, please. We'll stay in touch and have some local restaurants there. I'd like to take you guys to, and I know you'll love it.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, we've been waiting for a trip back. So, but that is one of the hard parts about swimming, right? Is that for someone who's a people person, it's completely you can't see. Talk about the power of vision, right?
Yes.
Like how as an athlete, right? Mm-hmm. Basketball is all about seeing the floor, seeing when you're not looking. Yeah. So how do you learn that?
Well, I think the first thing that I had to do was to get a coach. I had to get a coach because the guys I was training with, they were helping me, but I realized they have to train, So I got a coach, and just how the guard system works. I said, I need I realized. I said, man, Lord, I gotta get a swimming coach, and so I go to buy a pair of fins, a special pair of fins to help me stroke right. And while I'm there, I meet this lady. She's a business owner. She owns this little business, and they're selling a lot of items. And she says, I asked her, well, what do you do for a living? What do you do? Is this your only thing that you do? She says, no, I'm a coach. I'm a swimming coach, and I own this business with my husband, but I teach swimming lessons. And coincidence? I think not. I just asked for it, and I got it. And so she began to teach me, and so the biggest thing right now, once again, I'm doing mostly pool swimming, is just making sure that you do all the proper techniques, and then the open water is a little bit more difficult, but making sure that you breathe right and look up, breathe right and look up,
So do they talk to you about how do you prepare when there's like people swimming all around you, right? Because that's the difference between the pool. I know for me that would be the biggest challenge, is being in open water.
Yes.
I got taller man's complex in the movie theater. I can't even sit in front of people because I'm, I like space. Martial arts, everything is about clearing the space and moving through it. So when swimming, when you have a lot of stimulation and kind of sensory overload.
But I think for me, I'm learning the biggest thing is to stay focused, as in most endeavors in life. That you just gotta stay focused and kind of deal with the little distractions for a minute. But if you
keep focus on your breathing,
keep focused on your
breathing, stroke count, maybe.
Yeah. Absolutely, your direction that you're going, and
how do you keep your eye on the shore? I mean, I guess it's 800 meters isn't that far, but
that's a good question. One I can't really answer.
I might need your coach when you're done with it. Yeah, exactly. All right, I'm thinking too far ahead.
Yeah, but I will let you.
So in our time left, you mentioned the God system. What other steps would you like to share, or should people just buy the book so that they can learn themselves?
I would like to share them. The next one that I've learned is in the control of the words that come out of our mouths, because many times when people have goals and dreams that they want to have, they cross, the words are cross counter to what it is that they want. For example, I use an example of, there may be a single parent who loves her kids, and she's trying to provide for her kids, and she wants more. She's asking God for more. But the minute the kids get on her nerves, she says something like, they ask her for something, she'll say something like, no, you guys are breaking me. I can't never get ahead. But you're asking God for a vision for something, but your words are saying, no, I can't never get ahead. You're always breaking me. I never have enough. So what we've got to learn how to do is just only speak what we want. There's a principle in the Bible where the Bible says that let the weak say I'm strong, let the poor say I'm rich, right? Because our words begin to create our reality. So that would be the next key, is speak only what you want. And then the next one is that I've learned, Rich, is that when we have a goal or vision for something, I don't have to believe it. I just have to create the belief for it. And the way in which we create belief is by saying something over and over and over again with emotion. It becomes a belief. And once we get a belief going, then faith produces it. And then everything begins to line up. I just notice how things begin to line up, and things, when I get a belief for something, right? Like I'm believing now to do an Ironman. An Ironman in triathlon is a 2.4 mile swim in open water, 112-mile bike, and then a marathon, right? Right now, I can only probably swim at best, comfortably about 600-700 meters in water. I can probably comfortably ride about 35 to 40 miles, and I can run, 10 miles to half a marathon. But I'm believing for this Ironman. So when I introduce myself to my colleagues, we introduce each other as Ironman or Iron Woman, right? Because we're telling ourselves who we're becoming, and that over and over and over again creates belief. And then the last two principles are then to give. I've learned that in my life, that I've got to give to get what I want, right? So I bless other people with the intent that this is for my promotion, this is for my income increase, this is for my Ironman. So when somebody asks me for something, somebody is in need, I give it to them, and I say, well, Lord, this is for me completing my Ironman. And then lastly, coming to the realization that we are truly creators, and that we create our reality by three things: by the thoughts that we have, by the words that we speak, and the actions that we take. There's a story in the Bible, and I'll wrap up with this, that tells that at one time here on earth, man spoke one language. There was one tongue. There was one interpretation, and man had gotten together. It says in Genesis, and they said, "Look, let's build a city and a tower to the heavens so that we could meet God, reach God." And God looks down and He says to Himself, "Look at man and their imagination." And then He says, "There's nothing man can't do." And so then he divides. He says, "Look, let's divide their tongue." So I think God divided our tongues and our thoughts.
Tower of Babel story.
Tower of Babel, right?
Yeah.
And He divides man's tongue because He knew the creative power. Well, that creative power never left man, right? Our ability to think, our ability to speak, and our ability to act creates our reality. So if we control. If somebody's going through stuff in life and things aren't going right, and they're getting more of the things that they don't desire, it's because they're not controlling their thoughts. That if we have a negative thought, we've got to replace it with one that serves us. And then we only speak what we want, and we take the right action, and we, just like God, will create our reality.
That's beautiful. See, I tried not to cut you off, and now, but you have that. I mean, you have that public speaker, within you, and now I'm just thinking about when you start talking about Iron Man. Like it hit. It's a key point, right? You describe a scenario, and you see 2.4 mile swim. That's all I heard, and my anxiety went up. So it's really important when you're working with someone. Say, what was the short circuit, right? Something that this one part of fear can trigger a whole reaction to I could never do that.
Yeah. And the minute we say I can't, we stop our creative ability to figure it out. For example, I had my daughter, Jordan, one of my middle child daughter, and I asked her what she wanted to do for her 21st birthday. She says, "Look, I want to jump out of an airplane." I said, "Well, great, I'll do that with you. We'll jump out of an airplane." So a couple months later, we find ourselves going to a skydiving business, and they take us up 15,000 feet. We jump out at 14. You free fall for a minute, and then this most beautiful, blissful thing I've ever seen in my life. And then I would ask people, I tell them a story, and they say, "I can't do that." And I said, "No, that's not true. Yes, you can. How'd I know? I did it. And not only did I do it, my two daughters did." Right? Then there's nothing that we can't, in my opinion, that we can't do. When we say I can't, we stop our creative ability. Now, what you've got to do is, if you got a concern, a fear of something, then fear is nothing more than an emotion that's brought on about by thought. Is if we change our thinking about that, you can do it to get the most blissful thing that you ever want in your life.
Yeah. It's, that's the whole, making lemons out of lemonade.
Yes.
Scenario. And I was laughing about that. I know we have to wrap up here shortly, but this weekend we had played LA. We've had record rains out here. We shouldn't complain with our weather that we usually get spoiled with, but a couple weekends ago it was pouring, and the coach refused to cancel the game. And we went out there, and everyone was drenched, and it was just a scrimmage. It could easily stayed home or gone to the movies. But sure enough, when we got to our tournament round game, it started raining and hailing. And our kids were comfortable and playing around, used to it, and the other team looked like they wanted to hide in their jerseys. So, right, the minute you believe I can do this, I'm comfortable in this adversity,
absolutely,
I can play through it.
That's right.
It no longer ceases to be a challenge. So
absolutely.
It ceases to be a challenge.
I can versus I can't.
That's right.
That might be the second book I write. I can versus I can.
So, in closing, again, I'm going to let you tell everybody how to reach you, Mr. Sedrick Thomas, and the books. Real Wealth Begins with the Mind, and God's System. Is it out? Is it accessible soon? When are we looking at?
Real soon.
Real soon?
Yeah.
Tell our guests, please, how to get a hold of you, and what types of things should they direct your way.
Okay, fantastic. And once again, my name is Sedrick Thomas, and feel free to call me. I can be contacted via my mobile number, which is area code 504-421-0313. And you can also reach me via email at cedrickthomas@cox.net. And I spell Sedrick with an S, Sedrick. And so if you have any questions, anything about self-development or anything inspirational speaking, anything of that nature, I can be reached. And also, we didn't get a chance really to talk much about the financial services part of what I do, but if you have any needs for retirement planning, properly protecting your families with life insurance or investing, please contact me.
Yeah, so sorry if we glossed over that. You have so many interesting
okay.
accomplishments, but that's amazing that when people will reach out to you to learn about practical necessities of life.
Yes.
And those are important things. I know once you have children and once you have assets, it's important to know how to protect them and how to invest to make money work for you, which again is not something that most colleges or grad schools even teach. So having someone who you can go to, who can lead you
Yes.
and mentor you, I can speak from personal experience, is priceless.
Yes.
So I hope people will use Sedrick as a resource. One question I have for you, I was curious about the Primerica. When you get promoted, do they give you like a samurai sword? You get some sort of a
Yeah, they actually give you a ring like this. You get this.
Oh, that's a solid. That's a solid ring.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of a Super Bowl ring. Yeah,
what's the P stand for?
That is for power. The P stands for power. Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
Okay, and last question: does it have to be a 7-year plan, or can you make a
You can make it. No, it doesn't have to be a 7-year plan. It could be a 6 months. It could be a year. I recently did a vision board a year ago, and we were talking about the power of vision. Then I'd roll out of bed and I'd look at it, and one of them was to speak to an audience of about 300 people and teach the principles of the God system. And I would just roll out of bed. I was invited to a banquet to speak at a friend of mine, Lisa Jones' banquet. I turned it down because of a date that I had, and I accepted another invitation for another banquet. And then I look up, and after doing the banquet, it was the same vision that I had. It was the same vision that I had on my vision board, which was amazing to me. So picture this. I get invited by a great friend of mine.
And you say no.
Banquet. I say no. 30 days later, another friend of mine asked me, Rob Davis, to come do his banquet on the same date that I told Lisa no. I told him yes, and then I realized I had that weekend open because of a particular event. But I go and I do his event. Her event was in a traditional banquet hall with round tables and so forth. His was in an auditorium. And in the auditoriums, I was there to ask to speak, and I said, well, I'll talk to them about the God system. And it was the same vision that I had on this vision board. Coincidence? I think not.
Well, again, Sedrick, I mean, this is just exactly what I needed to hear, even as a podcast host, psychologist, coach. We all need to be in touch with inspirational athletes, high performers, professionals, people are out there who the main thing that I hear from your message is keep learning, keep growing, no matter what stage you're at.
Keep stretching.
Yeah, and to keep getting joy out of the people closest to you. Maybe you're not making a big sale that day. Maybe you're not making a big promotion, but you can influence. You may be able to help somebody else find a job or an opportunity. You may be able to introduce somebody else to a self-help tool. So finding agency in sharing, and there's a great book called The Go-Giver, which I often recommend,
yes.
which kind of talks about being the connector. And so if anything, that's what I hope we can help each other to be a resource to people out there. So again, thank you everyone for tuning in. Richard Listens on Instagram. I appreciate all the people who responded to our survey, all the tips, all of your vulnerability in sharing goals and things that you're working on this year. They did not go into the interwebs and disappear. We are using them, and a winner will be announced shortly. So, and stay tuned, 2019, while I work on composing my book. In the meantime, we're open to your guests, your suggestions, high performers in all realms. We will be back in 2 weeks we have next contestant on Ninja Warrior, celebrity trainers, and we're going to cover things including the NFL and the anthem and topics of controversy. So we're interested in hearing your thoughts, feedback, and opinions. Thank you all for tuning in and spending your time with us. Hope your commute or drive home or wherever you're listening is peaceful and wonderful. Have a great week, everyone. Richard, I'm out.